Welcome to the Foothills, a Colorado lifestyle and real estate podcast featuring mountain home real estate broker Robert Martin, who has over 25 years of experience assisting clients reach their goals and move forward. Tune in each week for a dynamic conversation with experts, Colorado adventurers, and residents that explores the ins, outs, and specific nuances of buying the perfect mountain home or selling your dream home in Evergreen, Conifer, Bailey, and surrounding areas to catch a glimpse into the Colorado lifestyle that's a part of you.
Thanks for joining the podcast today. Today we have Jaimen Dunn as our guest. Jaimen, how are you today? And thanks for joining us.
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing well, enjoying the fact that we got some rain, which is wonderful. So tell me about yourself and your background.
Well, I grew up in Texas. I went to college in Texas, and I met my husband when I was teaching school in Corpus Christi, and he was a Navy pilot. We lived in Rhode Island, and we lived in the state of Washington. Well, when we were in Rhode Island, he was flying off a carrier. But then he went with United Airlines. We lived in New Jersey for 17 years. And when our two children had finished high school, we moved to Colorado because we loved the mountains and we loved backpacking and skiing and just this beautiful place to be. And we had a friend who lived in Evergreen, and so we're introduced to the town. We thought this would be the perfect place to be. So that was in 1984.
1984, okay. And what, when you did move here, Joe, and what were your first observations of living here?
I loved the area, the scenery, the open space, and at that time, not so much traffic. My husband at that time we had Stapleton, and so the first half of his trip to the airport was in the mountains. It was just wonderfully delightful.
Yeah, you're so right. It's just nice and peaceful to get home and be able to relax and enjoy the serenity that we live amongst and all the wildlife. So over the years, Joanne, since 1984, what changes have you seen in Evergreen?
There are places that are developed that were not developed before. There's just a lot more people, but we still have the mountains. We still have the trees.
We all like it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned coming from Texas, and you lived in a lot of different places. So to shift gears a little bit, when you are a member of the Evergreen Mountain Area Historical Society, and when and where did the early settlers to the area come from, and why do you think they settled in this area?
That's a good question. The earliest industries here were actually lumbering. There were no trees in Denver, and so there were farmers and ranchers, a lot of ranchers, horses and cows, and I think maybe in the early days it was cooler up here, and so the earliest people that settled on Upper Bear Creek were coming up here because it was cooler than Denver.
Mm-hmm. Quality of life, sort of.
Yes, I think so, and yes.
And just everything that the area offers too. And certainly if there was timber that needed to be cut down, we have plenty of that, that's for sure.
Yeah, if people probably don't realize that back in the 20s, most of the trees were cut down because they were being used to build houses down in Denver. So most of the trees in the Evergreen area are second growth trees because that's what they used it for.
Oh, very interesting. So as a member of the Evergreen Mountain Area Historical Society that owns Medlen School, Medlen School began, it's located in Morrison off of 285, began as a pioneer log building around 1900. And the school district moved it across the road, added clapboard, and constructed a small teacherage. When did the one-room schoolhouse in Medlen actually open, and what grades did it serve when it was in operation, so to speak?
Well, from any record, we believe that it was built in 1886. And as you were saying, it was originally across the road. And as far as the number of students who were in there, it varied a lot. some of the records say that there were as many as 35 students in 1895. And they were, interestingly enough, at that time, there were about 12 of them who were over 18, or at least, or maybe over 16. And a couple of them were married. And I just guessing, I would say that they didn't have a school before. And so when they did open the school in 1886, even young people who had not ever learned how to read were happy to be able to go to school. But the number of students and the classes depended on who lived close by. They built these thousands of schoolhouses so they would be close enough for the children to walk. They had to be usually 2 miles at least, and they were probably, because of Evergreen's cold weather, most of the classes were held in the summer. But of course, I have read stories about children getting to school and their pants legs were frozen because they were walking through the snow. But as we know, we can get a 12-inch snowstorm in May.
For sure.
But the number of children I've seen pictures where there were only maybe 6 children there. But then we do have records that there were 35. So it varied according to who lived there.
So, Joanne, unfortunately, I lost the first part of it. We have a kind of an odd connection today with our internet. Would you mind repeating that? You talked initially about when did the schoolhouse open and what grades did it serve?
Okay, it opened in 1886 and it was all grades, supposedly first to eighth, but then, and sometimes there were, well, I guess you could still say they're eighth grade even if they were 18 years old, but the classes only would go to there. And I don't know, to tell you the truth, I do not know what happened when they finished eighth grade. Maybe they didn't have a high school there. I know there was a high school in Evergreen, but not in the Morrison area.
I know that I spoke with Bob Kester a couple of weeks ago. He said that he went to the school, the Pleasant Park School, I think through eighth grade. And then after that, he mentioned that he went to a school down in Denver, I think in Arvada or one of those schools for high school. So that this was obviously, he was, he was born in 26. So similar, this was obviously before that, but maybe high schools in the Denver area where people went to school there. And why did the one-room schoolhouse close? What caused that event?
Well, there was a consolidation of the Jefferson County schools. And so the closest school to the Medlen School was the West Jeff School, which is still there. Well, there is a West Jeff School, but it's the second building. The one that was built, this is in 1954. They built the school at West Jeff. But I've seen records that some of the children went to Morrison, but the majority of them at the Medlen School went to Conifer, to West Jeff.
I see. And Medlen School offers the opportunity for elementary age children to experience what it was like to go to school in a one-room schoolhouse. When did this program start, and how did you develop the curriculum?
Well, I had been a volunteer at the Hiwan Museum, and part of the school program was a one-room schoolhouse. But the way it worked with Medlen is in the building was deeded from the homeowners of the South Turkey Creek area. It was deeded to, at the time, the Jefferson County Historical Society. And I just happened to be president. And so I said, well, what do we do with this school? And they said, well, we need to restore it. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, the State Historic Fund had just been set up with the gambling money. And in order to get that, you had to be a state or a national historic site. And so I said, well, how do we do that? And so, because we were not a designated site, so I went through the steps of getting it designated. And then we got a $20,000 grant from this State Historic Fund. And it took us, it was all volunteer. We did have to hire people to a company to jack up the school and build a foundation. But then we also had a lot of volunteer labor. So the $20,000 came from this fund, but also about $8,000 came from the Jefferson County Historical Society. And so in 1998 was when we opened our first class. And it's grown since then. It started out with we just did 1 week, and promotion was always a challenge. A lot of the early students were the children of my daughter's friends.
Just to get out, let people know
But
about it.
it has grown to where it's become very popular. And we finally jumped into the 21st century and have had the signups online this year for the first time.
So what's it like at a day at Medline if for the young ones that attend?
Well, one of the things we do is to make sure that there's nothing modern about it. First of all, they wear costumes, and I say don't bring your cell phones and don't bring your water bottles. We have enamel cups that they drink out of, and we don't use any plastic, and there's no computers, of course. They have a pencil and a box of crayons, and they have a slate and chalk. And we do contests at the board. We have competition. I believe that children like competition.
Sure.
And we have an opening ceremony where they say the Pledge of Allegiance and sing songs. And I believe that patriotism is important, and I really emphasize that. We talk about the Declaration of Independence, and we also have a 38-star flag because Colorado was the 38th state, and so they have a project where they color a flag and put on stars and talk about history, but they still have a good time. They make lemonade with lemons on one day, and they make ice cream with a hand-churned ice cream, which is really delicious.
That was always my favorite thing when the kids would come.
And there's nothing low-fat about it, but they just get one scoop, so in a cone. I really try hard to make it the way it would have been. And also they bring their lunch on the final day. And I said, don't bring anything plastic. Don't put it in a Ziploc bag. Don't bring a plastic container. Try to be like it would have been in the 1920s.
It makes them think, about how things have changed so much and how different it was. If there was an ice box that had a big block of ice in it, possibly to keep things cool, or they didn't really exist. So no, what a good way to give them some thought-provoking experiences there. I always liked also that I know the kids enjoyed the spelling bee as well.
Yes, they did. Some refused to do it, and I said, "Come on, it's okay." But I always point out to them that everyone is different. My husband is very smart, but he can't spell, and I can spell, but I couldn't have flown airplanes. And I emphasize that because some of them, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, we all have talents, and we have skills, and sometimes we don't know we do, but it's nice to have somebody support and give us the incentive to figure those out, I guess. So Joanne, where did the furnishings come from for Medlen School? Where did you guys obtain those?
Well, it was kind of a long process. When we opened the school, there were only 10 desks in it. And so, I went to antique stores, and some people donated desks, and we now have 26 desks. So it's been a kind of a long process we have one big desk that I don't know how authentic it is, but in my searches for desk, I found this. It might have been in a library, but it's a bigger desk, and the children love it. But at the time, my father was still alive, and he loved history, and he loved what was going on. And I said, "Oh, Daddy, I found this great desk." But I said, "It cost $150. And he said, "That's okay, Joanne, I'll send you a check." So I have this, and I say this, the memorial to my daddy who loved history.
Oh, that's great. And what would you say that the children learn, and what possible life lessons could come from the kids experiencing a few days in one-room schoolhouse like Medline, and how could these lessons be applied to life today?
Wow, that's a good question. I guess that, well, first of all, we use the McGuffey readers have a lot of moral lessons about honesty and hard work. And I think, and we have a saying that talks about character and things that we write is like to do a good thing, a small thing now will do you'll be able to do a big thing later. And we talk a lot. I talk a lot about character and hard work and not being
So,
afraid to try things.
so kind of taking it back to that time. I mean, that those are core values, and they're good no matter what time you live. Those things are real important to be integrous and to help others and to be your best person, so to speak.
And that the fact that they have we have all the grades there. We have a lot of siblings and we have a lot of cousins, and I think it's a good experience for them to be able to help their younger sibling, and it's really sweet to see the way they do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, just the mentoring and having the young and the older students together to help each other out. That's real important. Yeah.
And one of the things that they get to do is to write with pen and ink, but I don't let the younger ones do it. It's just too dangerous.
Get
And
a little
so,
sloppy.
not dangerous, but messy, yes.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason I think some of them will want to come back because, oh, goody, I can write with ink this year. I'm
Yeah.
so excited.
Yeah, exactly. They matured enough. So you said it started in 1998. Have you been overseeing the program that long? And what is your favorite thing about those days in the summer?
Well, the only year that we didn't do it was we had to cancel because of COVID.
Gotcha.
But since then, I can keep tabs on it because the first year my oldest granddaughter had just finished first grade, and now she's 30 years old and teaching math at the Rocky Mountain
There you go.
Academy. So, what do I like the best? I just like being with the children. I like sharing a love of our country. And I love doing the plays with them. We do little plays. And, considering that my youngest grandchild is now 15, I love being with the younger children and their beautiful, sweet faces. They look up at me with these eager eyes. And it's just, I think it's just being with them and sharing my love of history and my love of appreciation of our country.
It is great spending time with young people, and you do realize that the world's in a good place. We're in good hands. And I think that's important for lots of people. Because sometimes as you get older, and if you don't have grandchildren or they move to different locations and life gets busy, you're doing your own thing as you get more seasoned in life and you don't spend time around young people, you kind of lose track, you're not in sync with them anymore. But I think that's a great way to know that we're moving in a good direction. I agree. It's wonderful to spend time with young people. So
When they did the one of the classes this summer, when we did the Pledge of Allegiance, I could not believe the volume of their little voices. It was so they were so enthusiastic. It was just thrilling.
that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful enthusiasm. Now, the Hiwan Museum is a big part of the Evergreen Mountain Area Historical Society as well. And when was the Hiwan Museum founded? And just tell us a little bit about that museum in Evergreen.
Well, the building itself was built in the late 1800s, and it was a home for two different families up until 1972, and then it was put up for sale by the Buchanan family. And at the time, Connie Fonstock was, I guess they had just formed the Jefferson County Historical Society. And then the other thing, there was a lot happening in Evergreen in the early 70s. As far as I wasn't here, but I had figured that out. And they had the county had just formed the Jefferson County Open Space, and Connie Fonstock and Hazel Humphrey, who are both gone now, but they were the leaders in the Historical Society. And so they convinced the commissioners to purchase the building, to purchase the Hiwan Museum. And so that's when it started, 1972. And the interesting thing is, when I was president, I finally figured out it was a kind of a marriage of sorts because there had to be cooperation between Open Space and the Historical Society. And so the Open Space had purchased the building and the grounds that it sat upon. But the Historical Society owns all of the collection, and they also manage all of the volunteers. But they did not purchase the Grove. And so the Grove was still up for sale, and they were going to build some kind of, I've heard high rises, but it was just probably condominiums they were going to build there. So there was a drive in the community to raise money to purchase the grounds, the Grove. And they didn't quite have enough for that. So the Jefferson County Historical Society took out a loan to purchase that. So for many, many years, the Grove belonged to the Historical Society. But then that got to be a pretty expensive endeavor to take care of it. So in, let's see, I put down that date. I think it was in 2000, the Historical Society deeded that back over to open space. So now the Grove belongs to open space. But it's a real blessing to have open space own that building, because there are other historical societies that have to take care of the maintenance, and the maintenance on a log building is huge. So the open space pays the director and then we provide all the volunteers.
Now, when someone would go to the museum, is it just a historical accounting of the families that lived there? It kind of shows you what life was like back then, or you have other historical stuff that from the area that now that can be viewed and seen there.
Well, if a person comes to do a tour, it's free to go on a tour unless it's a group. Some groups can come there, and they do just tell them about the history of the building, but at the same time they're hearing about Evergreen history. But the other thing that they do are the school programs. The fourth graders, they have a program for fourth graders that they learn about Colorado history. Then they have a program for second graders as well, and so the classes will come, and that's where we provide volunteers for that. That's the reason the museum opens at noon, is because the mornings are taken up with the classes with children.
Wow, that's great. It's great that they can go and do that, participate, at a young age to get that historical perspective. So since you've been here in 1984, what is your favorite thing about living in Evergreen? And what are some, you mentioned that when you moved here, you like to hike and get outside. Are those still some of the things you like to participate in, or what activities do you enjoy the most?
Well, I belong to the Evergreen Chorale, and that's very important to me. And the Evergreen Chorale does 2 concerts a year and 2 shows, so that's important. My husband is an artist, and he teaches classes at the I think they keep changing the name, the Evergreen Center for the Arts. They have a lot of activities there. There's a lot of hiking around Evergreen. They have hiking booked for that, and also if people, I have to mention for the museum that if anybody wants to hear anything more about history, there are a lot of books available at the museum.
Okay.
That they can. But I guess just sitting out on my deck and looking at the beautiful mountains, it's just a peaceful place. Even with all the people here, it's still can't take away those mountains and the trees.
I find that too. Most everyone I talk to, Joanne, that lives up here, is just the beauty of being a part of, the wildlife and the views and just everything that's offered. And it's a nice place to get away from if you're commuting, or just to get away from the city. Even though we're not that far away, it just has a real good feel. I think that's what is our draw as well. When people want to come and move up here and live here. So
when you drive home, my husband laughs about it because you're looking out for the elk. He says, every time you drive home, it's like you're on a game drive. You never know if there's going to be an elk or a fox or
a deer or a bear or a mountain lion. Or yeah, for sure. So if I was considering buying, or you knew someone that was, what advice would you give them as far as purchasing a home in the area, or due diligence, that sort of thing?
Oh, golly. Unfortunately, it's gotten very expensive. But it would just depends on what you're looking for. I live in Evergreen Meadows. We have 4 acres, and I love that. But I have about a 15-minute drive to the grocery store. And maybe some people would be looking for something that's closer, that they they're 5 minutes from the grocery store. I think it just really depends on the person. Hiwan Country Club, I don't know how big those lots are, maybe a half an acre, but
Hmm.
they're really close to what's happening. I mean, if people would like that. For children with elementary children, I don't believe there's any school where a child can walk to school. um,
Certainly
when we
not to
lived
where their
when we
pants will
lived
be
in New
frozen.
Jersey, we were
Mm.
across the street from the elementary school. And so if that's what you want, you're not going to get it in Evergreen. It's further to get to places, but it's well, in my opinion, it's worth it.
Yeah, most definitely. That was something that you do have to get used to. And my wife grew up in a rural community in Colorado, rather, and she was used to going to town. They were 15 miles from town, so for her it was a pretty simple process. And for me, I just like you, I was totally comfortable with it and just wanted to be in the mountains. So that all worked out. But that is a good consideration when you're looking. And a lot of times, Joanne, people they prioritize and say, okay, here's what's most important, and people have that kind of that list they can reference. So,
When my grandchildren were in elementary school. My daughter lived also in Evergreen Meadows, and her daughter was in the gifted and talented program. Well, that was at Parmalee, and so there was no bus that would take her there, but it was worth it to her to have a carpool to get the children to the school that she wanted her uh, children to be in.
yeah, so be prepared for possibly transportation. Sometimes if there's services you want to actually drive yourself or your children there, that sort of thing. Is there anything else, Joanne? I really appreciate the information you shared today that you'd like to share that didn't ask you.
Well, not really. I shouldn't. Back in 2015, we had Medlen School got on the National Register of Historic Places,
Oh,
and that was kind of a
awesome.
project to do it. But we were kind of proud that we did that.
Yeah, took some effort to do that. Well, congrats. That
Yeah.
is cool. Yeah, and it is a great experience for anyone who's interested to
Well,
participate in that.
the reason we did it is because the Conifer Historical Society had gotten their little schoolhouse that's in Conifer, which was built in the 1920s, that got them on the National Register. And I said, well, now wait a minute, our school is older. And so when my friend Diane said, well, now, Joanne, why would you want to do that? And I said, well, I think it's called bragging rights. But
That
anyway,
the
it was
competitive side.
yeah, I guess I'm a little bit competitive, but uh,
Oh, that's
that's
great. You're talking about the Pleasant Park School
no,
in
actually,
Conifer. No?
it's no, it's white. It's on Barclay Road
Oh, okay.
between,
Okay.
and I guess it's in Conifer.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
and but it we don't have
I,
bathrooms.
I think
We
it's
have
called the Little White Schoolhouse, isn't it?
yes, I think it's called Little
Yeah.
White Schoolhouse,
Okay.
and
Gotcha.
we have electricity, but they also have running water and flush
Hmm.
toilets.
Gotcha. So they're a little
And so
bit
I
more
thought, well,
upgraded.
we're a little more primitive than that.
No, that's awesome. Well, where can people go, Joanne, if they want to learn more about the Evergreen Mountain Area Historical Society, Medlen School, or if they'd like to volunteer or sign up for Medlen?
If they want to hear about the Hiwan Museum, they just go to the museum. It's open. I think it's closed on Mondays, but it's open every day from 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and the tours are free. And or they can go to our website. I keep forgetting about our website, and it's emahs.org.
Okay.
And I think there might even be a click on button there to volunteer. That would be great because the museum is always looking for volunteers. We have a little bit less opportunity for volunteers because it's such a small program. But one thing I'm thinking about doing, we never have done this before, is to have an open house day that people could come and see the schoolhouse. I mean,
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I have a
Hmm.
key to the school, and that's about it. We don't usually, because the fact that the desks are designed for children, so most adults have a hard time sitting in the desk. But we might figure out an open house maybe in the fall, and maybe have some kind of an activity. Ice cream, maybe. I don't know. We haven't really figured that one out, but
Oh, that would work for me. That'd be great.
our visibility is growing, but earlier it was like, where is that anyway? In fact, there was you might have seen the article in the Canyon Courier this week. One of the reporters came out and took some pictures and asked some questions. And the first week that she came, she got lost. She couldn't find it. So I don't even think a GPS works to get to our school. So a lot of people don't even know it's there.
Yeah, that's true. I certainly, when our kids were going there a few years ago, a lot of people were unaware of it. So hopefully that can help in getting a little bit more information out. So,
well, one of the beauties of it is very different from Evergreen. It's the South Turkey Creek is much more rural than anything in Evergreen.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It really gives the children an idea of what it would be like to live there. Of course, we have roads and electricity, but it's still, you drive down that road and you think you're out in the country.
Yeah, it does. It certainly does have a rural feel to it, and a nice diverse feel, I guess, compared to some other areas. So, well, thank you so much, Joanne. I really appreciate your time, and just wanted to reach out and get some really cool information from you. So we really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
To the Foothills, a Colorado lifestyle and real estate podcast. On the podcast, I interview real estate experts, Colorado adventurers, and residents who enjoy the serenity and lifestyle of living in our mountain communities. Tune in each week for a conversation that explores the ins and outs of buying the perfect mountain home or selling your dream home, and catch a glimpse into the Colorado lifestyle that's a part of you.